Welcome, everyone, to a live episode of Planet Nerdtooine. As always, I am joined by my esteemed co-host, Year of the Collector. But today, we have a very special guest, a good friend of not only me, but my old podcast. I interviewed him more on that podcast than anyone in the history of the podcast. My good friend, Ringo Nominated creator and writer, Jason Douglas.
Hi, guys.
Hey, welcome.
So,
Thank you.
before we do anything else, how the hell are you, my friend?
Dude, I'm here, and that is good enough, right?
It's
you know what? I was realizing like before. So we, people love it when you say this like on podcasts and on live streams and shows, but it's like before we went on air, we were talking. And what I realized is what we didn't talk about, and what's really been on my mind almost all day, like leading up to this, is we were talking about how long it's been for you and I, like the last time we did this, and it's been a while. But like I haven't even personally done this in a while. I've had like 11 months off of like that kind of interview circuit. And you remember that first interview. That was one of the ones when you and I did that for the very first time. That was back in the I didn't know how this worked whirlwind digital tour of my first book, where it had dropped into like lockdown and flopped hard. And I spent that next 18 months doing, because nobody told me this isn't what you do. I did 75 interviews, and that's what it picked up steam. That's how it sold out. That's how the publisher had to buy back all the copies from the stores that it had taken to meet the online demand. And that's where the Ringo nominations came from. But like during those cycles, like when I'm doing a Kickstarter or whatever, when I'm promoting whatever, like I get into, it's just like with teaching, which is my day job, right? Like,
Okay.
Like you can go in there and I can do that all day, and right. and it's been so long. I was like, I started getting worried today as I'm kind of like cruising through the day with the teenagers, knowing exactly what I'm doing, hitting the beats each, first hour, second hour, third hour, whatever. I'm like, man, I haven't done an interview in a long time. I hope I don't jack this up for the boys, Like, get up there and go, I've forgotten how to do this.
What do I do with my hands? No.
Right.
Well, no, that's the one thing I think we've always had a good rapport. And when we start talking, it becomes more of a hangout than a true interview. And we just somehow end up hitting all of the right beats anyways.
Yeah.
So it's at least on any podcast I'm on, I think you could come in 10 years later and be like, I'm good.
You and I we've never had a bad show. We've never had a bad talk. We've never had a bad time. Because of that. And that's like, look, every show that I've ever been on, every interview I've ever done, if I'm doing, it's kind of how I feel about being in front of the kids in the classroom. It's definitely how I feel about interacting with like fans new and old at conventions and stuff. But like, if I'm doing my job, you shouldn't know whether I'm having a bad day or even if it's going poorly, Exactly. But on my end, like internally, I am always massively appreciative of like talking to you, where it is a much more natural hangout, and what we talk about is what we talk about, as opposed to like I've got to carry more water or move it along, because not everybody's like as good at this job as you are, you know what I mean?
True.
So like there's a handful of people that I've talked to over the years, you being one of them, where it's just like, oh yeah, this is fun. I enjoy this time. It isn't work. It is a hangout.
You're gonna make me blush. You need to stop.
Listen,
I do
the truth. You got to tell the truth, man.
The truth shall set you free.
That's right.
But yeah, no, this is actually Year's first time getting to talk to you live before, and so Year's one of the few people in my circle that is still in the circle. So
yeah.
when I decided to come back with a podcast, I was like, I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
And then literally right at that exact moment, the other podcast he was on just like died. Like literally, I was like, I'm doing it in a couple weeks, and then he was like, and this is our last episode, and they interviewed me on their last episode, and I was like, wait, last episode? Really?
It's
So-
listen, let's get topical. I know this won't be evergreen forever, but it feels very season 2 of Andor to me. Things are locking into place. The pieces are coming together, and now you guys are where you should be.
Don't judge me too hard. I haven't even started Andor season 2 yet.
Okay, I'm not going to judge you hard. The only way I will judge you hard is if you do not, once you get to it, proclaim it the masterpiece that it is.
Oh, I'm sure. I thought Andor season 1 was one of the best things they've ever done.
Okay,
and I was surprised it didn't do better in the ratings and the watches. Like people were just complaining about it because it wasn't. It was. Oh, where's my Luke Skywalker? I want lightsabers.
It's literally. Oh God, I hope we're not just making people turn off right now. But it is. It is literally like. This is coming from the person born in 1977 who, a couple months before A New Hope comes out. This is coming from the person that in the spring and summer of 1980 went to see Empire Strikes Back 6 weekends in a row with my dad, cried like a baby when we didn't go for the 7th, who used to get borderline frostbite from the ages of 3 to 6 because every winter in Michigan, I would go outside and recreate Hoth scenes where Luke's escaping, the cave, and would hold my face in the snow for the same beats and counts that he did out there and not pull it up, even if my face was burning. So this is not a light, fan thing. This is nothing besides coming from a hardcore fan. There is nothing in the Star Wars universe that approaches art like the way Andor does. It's real TV. It's not
coming from like a creator, someone like you who writes stories. I think also because me, I break things down way more than they have to be when I watch things like that. So sometimes for me it becomes a job. But when you look at something truly beautiful and like The Last of Us, for me, that's what it is right now. Like the cinematography they've used, the way they've used the sounds, everything's been just so beautiful. I'm just like, you know what? Anyone who complains is just wrong. I'm sorry.
It's Tony Gilroy is what it is. It's like a real master of the craft doing something. I mean, like George Lucas is my hero, but all of the political machinations that he was trying to do in the prequels, Tony Gilroy does effortlessly and fascinatingly in this movie. Like the spy thriller element of it and weaving in the politics of it, it's like done like it's closer to watching All the President's Men than it is to episode 1, right?
Just in the Star Wars universe. I think that's why Mandalorian did so well too, because it was basically like it was the Western motif that they were kind of going for, but they just steered right into the skid, and it's just in the Star Wars universe. And that's a whole other show. But Larry, we are here to talk about you, not talk about Star Wars.
You knew that this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen.
Good thing maybe that we got it out the way super early. So that Jason just knows, all right, no, we know better. But so to give a little background to anyone who's new to who Jason Douglas is, which is crazy to me, he is a very talented writer. He's also a teacher, and he has come out with two of my I've only read the one shot of Jane American, but I'm gonna get on the whole big book soon. Two great stories that are not the conventional, but somehow very conventional. It's crazy how you walk that line. Like with Parallel, it was that like sci-fi thriller type thing, but it wasn't, but it very much was. It's beautiful. You want to talk about how you?
Well, no, you just done. You just did what I have now for a handful of years. Because let's get one thing like out front. Like I am a now grizzly middle-aged man who's been public school teacher for 25 years. My entry into this dream come true of a latent dream of mine to be making comics since I was 12 years old. This is under 5 years old. Okay. So I'm relatively new at this. I've been a fan exponentially longer than I've been a creator. But what you just did was you boiled down to brass tacks, like who I've kind of in the last 5 years discovered who I am as a comic writer. And the irony, something that's kind of driving me nuts. And we've talked enough to know that I talk too much. And as you get better at, talking to people at cons or talking on interviews, you are supposed to be narrowing the focus and making things more concise and getting to the point earlier. I just by nature am going in the opposite direction. So I have a whole spiel we're about to go into about what you just said in like 3 seconds. It's going to take us 5 hours. But you're right. I would say, it was true on the first book. It was true in parallel. But like when it happened again for the second book, the one shot and then the expanded story in the 132-page graphic novel of Jane, like I think this is who I am as a writer, at least as a comic writer. And that is balancing the same way that as a comic fan, I am a 50-50 split between reader and collector. Right? This part of the basement is dedicated to all the trades and graphic novels from all my favorite writers and characters and stories that I read again and again and again. Right. And over there are all the long boxes from the run I've got to get and the cover that I need and and the key that, it's a good price. I can't say no. Okay. Right. And I try not to let them battle each other. So as a writer, I think it's the same. It's the analogy. It's the same. It's a balance between the important / universal relatable themes that I think can attract and be related to by anybody. But the comic nerd in me also wants to wrap it in a comic book trope that you're like, I know what it means when she can lift a couple tons of steel above her head. I know what that dark sci-fi. I know about parallel universes, and then at the core of it are these deeper themes. So like Parallel is a dark sci-fi twisted tale, kind of like an episode of Black Mirror, Twilight Zone.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely.
But it begs the question of you, the reader: what price would you pay for a second chance at all the dreams you thought you left behind forever? So it's like it is our main character Landon going through what the kids are calling the quarter life crisis. Now it might have been a little bit of a midlife crisis, got me off my butt to pursue this dream in the first place, right? Going through my own dread about time passing. Right. But it's like time passing, dreams deferred. Did I make right choices? Is it too late? We all have our version of that, right? It is literally a universal theme. It's just a matter of when and how it manifests for you. Anxiety, depression, dread. Everybody's got their version. Landon, though, and here's the sci-fi wrapping paper that I love so much. Landon starts hearing voices, seeing visions of a parallel version of himself, reaching out, offering him that second chance at the big dream that he left behind. He thought the door was closed on forever. Now, what makes it very compelling to read is, unfortunately for Landon, it is not, I shall repeat, not in his best interest physically and mentally in the here and now to pay that price. It gets dark in the second half, right?
You had me at parallel version of himself reaching out to make this offer. You had me there. I'm sold.
But what I think what I have loved about the feedback to that book over the last couple of years, more than the award nominations, more than the complete sellout, more than the special edition more than the special printings we had to rush to because we ran out of copies. All that stuff. More than that is the people who said either, oh, that was a really good rereadable comic because I like the ambiguity at the end. I like the sci-fi twist. I like the borderline body horror. I like that stuff. I like the genre of it.
Right.
And then the other half of the feedback are those people who are like, oh, this hit home. The mental health aspect, the you are not alone when you're suffering through your own crisis. This helped me. I reached out and talked to somebody because I read your book. That's better than all the award nominations on the planet.
So I might make you cry here with this. What's funny about that is I wanted to write the comic that I'm working on, Herox Monsters, for a while. Yeah. But after I read that book, that's where it became real for me. When I read Parallel, I'm like, wait a minute. Hold on. Like, I'm going to give myself that second chance right now. Dude, and that's what really launched everything. So,
dude, when I do,
kind of your fault.
When I do that's a compliment. When I do panels at conventions, they're either throwing me into Like if it's a solo panel, it's usually like a comics in the classroom kind of panel.
Right.
Or a more broad, my weird atypical journey into comics, because like Parallel did not get published in a typical 21st century way, right? You and I have had that conversation. But when I'm on like a panel, usually with a couple other indie creators, it's always that gig of talking to the audience. How did we get there? How could you get there? And a lot of those questions are, what do I do? How do I do it? And it's like, it's literally that. The lesson of, I mean, there might have been, my own midlife crisis that got me off my butt, plus a couple other variables that kind of came together at the right time. But like that question of, is it too late? And you hope the answer is no.
Right.
And that piece of advice I always give people who ask, which is like, how do I do this? And the answer is you just do it.
Yep.
Because right. Because like it's just, I mean, it's a cliche, but the first step is the hardest always. But like the thing that sounds trite, which is, how do you make a comic? You make your comic. How do you start your podcast? You start your podcast. And that it sounds small. It sounds almost like you're being dismissive, but you're not, because the reality is, if you make it, it now has infinite potential. There's no promise that what comes next is success or even publishing or anything. But I can't promise you what happens next. This is like my big line every time. I can't promise you what happens next, but I can promise you that if you don't do it, absolutely nothing will happen.
You'll never know. You'll never find out.
Yeah, like you, if you didn't take that first step, your book never exists. And that is definitive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, I don't care whether, I mean, I'm flattered, but it doesn't matter where the motivation comes. The victory is not mine. The victory is yours. The victory is whatever was the catalyst for you. Now something exists in the world, and dude, it can never be taken away. It exists.
Yeah.
And that's awesome, because that's literally 99% farther than 100% of the dreamers out there.
Yep. No, absolutely. When you have a dream, sometimes you just got to just say, you know what? I'm diving in. Whatever happens. No, I say that all the time. Like people ask me now, like, and I'm like, you realize I've published like a book and a half, right? Like I've done basically nothing. You know this, right? They're like,
it's more than most people who dream. It just is. And that's like, I mean, and I suffer from this too. I think everybody does. It's human nature to then go, well, that's nothing, or that's not enough, or to be self-effacing or whatever. But the truth is, if you make your thing and it absolutely fails harder than anything that's ever failed in the universe, you're still 99% farther than everybody else. Right. And it's one thing for anybody to say, take satisfaction from that, because we're never really satisfied. Grass is always green, I think it's human nature, like I said, but you're still so much further than anybody else. And you should be proud of that, But coming back to what you were asking, like trying to again, too much from me, but so it's time for the next book. And whether it's the one shot or whether it's the big book, it is a drastically different story.
Oh yeah.
It's a World War II coming of age story, right? But it is the exact same structural premise as Parallel, in the fact that it has a noticeable, recognizable comic book wrapping paper around it, and certain story beats and certain tropes. But it's really about something universal that no matter who you are, no matter what you age are, no matter what your situation in life is, you can relate to. So it's this World War II coming of age story. Takes place in historic Plymouth, Michigan, where I grew up. And so the way I would describe it is like during the war years, Jane, our protagonist, is living a life of family, of stability, of hope, until she is not.
Right.
War literally brings tragedy to the front doorstep, changes her in unbelievable ways that are better left hidden. Insert your metaphor here. And end of the war comes, and the reality that dad's not coming home, that society has now decided that mom no longer has a place as Rosie the Riveter. It's left Jane with this choice. She can stay safe, she can stay hidden, or she can embrace who she really is, and now, wink, wink, what she can truly do for the sake of everybody that she loves. So it's kind of this book that is, you have that ordinary person with extraordinary abilities trope wrapping paper, but it's, what is it really about? It's full of those universal relatable themes about identity, about self-worth, about self-actualization, about you being you in a world that tells you that's not okay. Right. But what makes this story so deeply personal to me in a different way than Parallel was? I mean, Parallel was me working out my own, right?
Right.
Okay, dealing with my own crisis. This book is named after and dedicated to my late grandmother, who went through all this 80 years ago.
That's really what I wanted to get at during this interview, because one of the things that we sometimes fail to do is like sit down with our elderly and ask them about their life, how life was during whatever period they or wherever place they grew up with, right? And when we don't get those conversations out of them, we don't interview them about their life because we think we know them because we are related, we're family. We lose out so much information, so much history, right? That is hidden inside of every one of us. I remember I majored in social work in college, right?
Oh,
and
great.
one of the classes that I took was like, dealing with the senior people. And one of the assignments that I got was to go interview a senior citizen, and I ended up picking my own grandfather, right?
Yeah.
I learned so much about my grandfather that I did not know.
Yeah.
And things that were, let me give you just like a small example here, right? I had like a vague memory of watching my grandfather play like recreational softball with like friends and family and stuff like that, right? It wasn't until I was like in my 20s that I actually talked to him and did this interview that I find out my grandfather's like family, like immediate family, like his siblings and his parents had their own place in a wall in the sports history museum of my town, because they were so influential for all sports in our city. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I heard that I was like, what? I went down the next day to the museum of the history of sports, and I saw the picture myself. I was like, that's my grandfather and all of his siblings right there. They have like their own wall, because all of the things they did for sports as players, as coaches, whatever, you name it. And I had no idea, right? If I never had that conversation with my grandfather, I would have never found out.
I think one of the great ironies of us living inside, being the heroes of our own story, right? Living inside our own heads at all times. One of the great ironies of being the main character in your story as you go through life is, unless you're like a natural empath or make an effort to seek out, we're only seeing other people through the lens of our own story at the most times. And even if you think about the art that we make, there is a protagonist and everybody else is like an ancillary character for the most part, which is kind of how we go through life and live it. And the irony, of course, is every person that we come into interaction with that is a side character or a second lead at best in our own hero's journey is a fully fleshed out, fully lived life main character in their own life.
Yeah.
Including the people who are closest to us,
Yeah.
like our grandparents are literally secondary characters in our story.
Right.
And yet they've just by the math of it have had a much richer, longer story than we have.
Right.
I mean, I talk about that book being, inspired by my grandmother. My grandfather is dedicated to, because my grandfather, who I love that you brought up what you brought up, because it might be a decade ago now. I spent a summer, and he had already been, he was a World War II vet, and he had already been like interviewed by several museums and had done pretty big on camera and audio interviews about his war experience for a couple of different outlets. Okay. And I spent a summer picking his brain. He was in his early 90s. Wow. And just about the 20s and the 30s. So he was born in 24, and just the pre-war years, like growing up in the Depression, like, and seeing those effects and what was in his life and all of his sports exploits, and and all of that existed on tape, and it's now forever. And it's like you said, the insights are massive to things that I didn't know. Cause I grew up hearing all the stories.
Right.
This is the 100 stories that I hadn't heard. And it just fleshed it out in an amazing way. And so it naturally, I think that experience that we had, where I was over there a couple times a week for an entire summer, and I put him on camera and we just talked, and we go like watch a baseball game or something. And I think it naturally led that he was my wingman in the research phase of Jane American, because the dude lived it.
Right.
And he got first look at everything. And it's very freshly dedicated him, because last year at the age of 99, when that dude realized he wasn't going to see 100, and boy, was he not happy with that. That guy wanted that round number so bad. He made me promise that the book that contains the name and likeness of his high school sweetheart, my grandmother, would see print. So this is personal in a different way to me, right? This is me fulfilling a promise to generations that came before me.
And let me say, I don't want to cut you off, right? But I have to say this. I read it, and the first thing I told Cal was like, bro, this is a love letter, right?
Yeah.
And I had even got to the credits where you actually mentioned that this was like inspired on your very own grandparents. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. It like the whole story, the environment, like the time period, like the historical accuracy of it doesn't feel like a cliche, doesn't feel like a trope, doesn't feel like it was basically taken or inspired from a documentary from, I don't know, the History Channel. It felt like a personal story, like a story that maybe my grandfather would have told me. Right.
Yeah.
And that comes across
through
the art, through the writing, to the characterization, like the subtlety of basically throwing hints out there on how the things were in that era, like the rationing of food, the lack of employment, the war efforts, like all of that is there. I can read into it, but it's not like all in your face. And I I'm not trying to make you blush. I'm generally, I generally read all these things into that, and it felt so like such a warm story, like very personal. And props to you and the entire creative team, because this is, I can see why people why sold out, why you have to get a second version, why people come up to you and ask you how to do it, because it's easy. I can see why easily it touches people, so people can relate to it.
Well, I got to show you how I kicked up the history nerddom a level in the graphic novel. So in the back, so we've got a wraparound softcover, we got our wraparound hardcover, right? And in the back, I look good. I like good back matter. I like that back matter that like you're getting your dime's worth.
The succulent back matter.
So I did one of my a top 5 X-Men story for me is Magneto Testament. Greg Pak wrote it, and it's I love it for several reasons. And there is a lot of Magneto Testament in Jane American, similar era, right? Okay. It's a pre-World War II story for the most part. In a World War II story, there's that. There is the taking, you know, it is a superhero comic book, Marvel character comic book that has 0.1% of the superheroism that you expect in a Marvel comic book, right? So, you know, Jane it's a superhero story. It is totally not a superhero story. There's no superheroes in it, right? She can just do some things, and it's about her trying to figure out how to do that in a way. And but the thing that I loved the most, and I love this about a lot of writing, is when there's endnotes, when the text itself is so rich and it does it in a way that isn't, you know, hitting you over the head with it, right?
Right.
Some of the worst writing, and this is me talking as an English teacher. This is me talking as somebody who tried to teach fourth graders to write for 13 years and has now been trying to teach eighth graders to write for 12 years. Like, there is no worse writing than the on the nose. You know, you want to get a theme across about you want to get a theme across about like empathy, and the way you do it, the way you think you do that as a writer, is have a character say, "Goodness gracious, aren't you being empathetic today?" Like, just make me just stab my eyes out right now. Like, that is it's trash, right?
Yep.
So like being able to have like a rich historical context that is just organically part of the story as opposed to forcing it into the story. But then again, when you're reading it and enjoying it, I also believe that it can be an enriching experience to read it again when you have that context. So, end notes. Literally every historical Easter egg and in and out, chapter to chapter, page by page, that you either caught closely or missed. Like, did you see that thing in the background right there? That is this model Ford, and the reason they have that is that. When they drop that name, let me tell you about that program, that side program that was going to the war that's only mentioned in one line. Here's a link to it. Here's the background of it, like all that stuff.
The whole lexicon.
And it's kind of like, all this. And this comes back to something that you and I talked about years ago, even on that first book. Here's the other thing that I knew about myself as a writer, I think, from even that first book. And this has just solidified it. I, as a reader and as a writer, am going to try to live by this. If I'm going to ask you as a reader to suspend your disbelief about anything in my book, parallel worlds reaching out, offering you a chance, a teenager who can lift a couple tons of steel above her head, right? If I'm going to ask you to go, well, that's not real, but I'm going to buy in. My desire is to have you bump up against nothing else. So like in parallel, when they're in the back of that ambulance, I made sure I'm talking to my doctor cousin. Exactly what are the words, right? There is a reason why most doctors and medical professionals hate medical shows. There's a reason why I never watch.
I understand that because I'm in the military and I hate watching military movies all the time. I can't watch them. I be stopping the movies to explain my wife why what we see in camera is wrong. I would never do that.
Look, they make the movie, they write the book that isn't even close, and that's just don't even put that in front of me. But like for people who know the world, it doesn't matter if 99% of it is spot on. You hit that one thing and you're done.
Yeah.
Right. So for this one, you know, my grandfather was an invaluable resource. The amount of research I did online was, I'm a history nerd anyway, so it was painless. You know, I'm just making sure you know, you get into the Johnson kitchen in that book and you see that icebox. I challenge you to look it up online. I mean, that icebox is from like 1932. And even though that scene is taking place in 1942, because you know what? They ain't loaded with money, so it's not going to be a new fridge. Okay. You're not going to find a single vehicle that is, wait a minute, that didn't come out until 52. No way am I doing that. Down to, and there's a lot more factory. One of the main settings is this actual factory from Plymouth, Michigan that my great grandfather worked in. It got a war contract during the year. So down the road, you have all those big GM and Ford plants making tanks and planes.
Right.
In the surrounding Detroit suburbs, Plymouth being included, all those smaller factories, this place is called Wall Wire. I mean, they were a wire factory. They started making subsidiary parts, or in this case, Marsden mats, which are those, they're the long metal sheets that get kind of the holes punched in that made the temporary runways in the Pacific and Europe. Okay. So you didn't have to capture an airstrip. You could make your own. And
that's in their book too. That's
yeah.
insane.
And there's a lot more factory in there. And every factory scene you see, nothing is from Annie's imagination. As talented of an artist as Annie is and has become, all that stuff is sourced from real place. My grandfather got us a tour of Wall Wire the week before they tore it down. Wow. And because they were tearing it down, they had stripped it back down to its like original fittings. So when I went in there and took the video and took the pictures and took my notes, it was as if it were the 1940s again, you know? And so like there's this one of my favorite little tiny details, and only the most pedantic nerd will appreciate this, but like there's a scene in the graphic novel, so well past the point where it cuts off with the cliffhanger and the one shot. Yeah. But there's just a scene where Jane's working at the factory and all the war vets are back there and they're working. It's that typical scene where you see them going down the line and they're doing they're getting their checks and they're doing the punch card on the punch clock. So something that like a little detail that I love, and I probably put it in the end notes, is that punch clock is not only the punch clock that was there because I saw a photograph of it at the but it's in the exact same spot, because when I took the tour, you could see the freaking shadow line on the wall. So where she draws it is literally where those dudes punched that clock in 1946.
And things like that, like someone like me, like Year knows, I'm sure he's at the point now where he's like, if he sends me one more message on Discord about one random little flower out of order in an entire scene, I'm gonna lose it. Stuff like that really not only makes me happy as a nerd and someone who just focuses on things like that, but it shows how much care you took in making this book. Because yes, you know the inspiration and the source from your family, but you could still have just thrown it together. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but you. No, and I don't think
most
had to make it perfect.
I don't think most people do notice, and that's not the point. Because here's a big sweeping statement about people who create. With any creative endeavor, you know, there's always a percentage of people who are doing it for whatever reasons they are, and you can call them valid reasons, you call them whatever. But people make art or people create for their own reasons, and if it's for fame and fortune, well, more power to you. But like, I think most people who are willing to put the blood, sweat, and tears into a creative thing, especially let's talk about indie comics, where your margins are pennies at best. If you're going to put the time, when you get into the black, if you get into the black, it's pennies at best. Look, whatever level of enjoyment you get out of something that I create, fantastic. Whatever level it is. But what you got to understand is the people who make it, most likely, are also doing it for themselves, right? Yeah. Like all that historical detail in there that is literally just kind of lurking in the background that you notice or don't notice or notice upon second look or whatever, that was more for me than for you. Now, because I'm who I am, I got to do it in a certain way so that when you do notice it, you're not like, I don't get that email. It's like, well, actually, like I don't want a well actually email will ruin my week.
You're not trying to hear any of that. It's like,
so it's not like
you think it's not accurate. Here's the videos. Here are the pictures of the inside of the factory. Thank you and have a good day.
Right. Yeah. But like, you know, I mean, if you're going to put the time, effort, money, blood, sweat, and tears, especially into indie comics, chances are you love it. Because why else would you go through what, you know, a lot of casual readers don't know is a lot of pain and suffering.
Oh my God.
And I mean, you know now, right? And
yeah.
And are you ready for this? You wouldn't trade a second of it, would you?
I wouldn't trade. I would make a couple different decisions, but I wouldn't trade.
Sure, but like that experience you had.
True. Listen, you know, one of the wisest creations of all entertainment said, you know, nothing's better, no better teacher than failure.
Oh yeah.
Failure, greatest teacher.
Let me share this. Yes. Let me share this like different perspective, right? A couple of weeks ago, maybe last month, I want to say, we had Martin the artist that worked with Kyle
Yeah.
on his comic book, right? And I have heard from Kyle, like some of the struggle, some of the back and forward between them as creators, right? Like, you know, not necessarily locking horns in a negative way, but trying to like bounce off each other to like make this thing happen. And I know there was moments that were frustrating for sure. I know there were moments where like they just kept going back and forward, and progress was not being made until they both felt that the product was satisfactory for both of them, right? And then having them together in the podcast and me interviewing them and just seeing them, that joy of like, not necessarily, I don't want to call it trauma bonding, but
That's what it was. That's what it was.
but their joy and their respect and the love that they develop for each other going through that struggle, right? Like it was palpable to me, and I had nothing to do in that process, but I could feel it, I could sense it, that they felt like they went through the ringer and they came out on the other side, and they're happy and proud with what they created. It was such a beautiful moment for me to appreciate them being so I don't know funny about the whole thing, about the whole process, about
there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. It is like between the one shot and the 130-page graphic novel, Dave Lentz, letterer and art director, Annie Wright, artist, and me as the writer and kind of showrunner, I guess, because like I own this. Like I'm
project manager, project director. Yeah.
I'm in Michigan, Annie's in Indiana, Dave's in Pennsylvania. We lived together every day for 2 years, and there's nothing, never to actually physically be in the same room together, except for a couple times I was at I was at a guest at like cons in Indiana, and Annie would come because it was nearby, but like never in the same room. And we lived and breathed together multiple hours every day for 2 years. There is nothing quite like that. And because it's indie comics, there isn't corporate infrastructure standing between you and everything else. It's
no facilitators. There's no
little family, this little family you create making the thing until it's made.
Yeah. See, that's one thing that people don't understand about making comics. Like, let me give you a prime example. You're gonna understand this, even if it's not the same thing. You have Peach Momoko, for example, writing and doing art for Marvel right now, right?
Yeah.
And they have this guy. His name is Zach Davison. He gets credit as writer and letterer for some of her books, because Peach Momoko, the way she will write dialogue, it will be in Japanese, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Davison has to not only translate the dialogue, but contextualize it to the English language, because, and I saw him explain this in an interview, the Japanese language is like informed dialogue. Like people don't structure their sentences, don't talk to each other the same way people talk each other to, like maybe in English or Spanish, right? Like they don't describe things in the same way. They don't reference things in the same way. So a lot of it was being lost in translation. So he had to, like, he was basically hired by Marvel to deconflict the storytelling, to deconflict whatever the editors will see on their side, and scratch their head because the dialogue didn't make sense. So he is literally that bridge in that language barrier between
it's two different jobs. It's a translation job and a translation job.
Yeah. So now he's like always paired up with Momoko for her books. Like they're now a team. Whenever Marvel hires her, they bring him in. Like
you gotta hire him too, right?
Like, world. You don't have like a conflict manager. You don't have somebody that will reprove something before it gets back to you, or you don't have somebody that will be that buffer between the letterer and the writer, or between the writer and the artist, or between the penciler and the inker, or the penciler and the colorist. Like, you guys have to like face each other and confront each other on that process, right? Like,
Kyle, do you
that's
remember? Do you remember this? Do you remember the story I told you like a million years ago about? So like.
About how you messed up Lentz when he was doing the lettering because you
Well,
asked him
no,
why.
Before that.
That's one of my
I'm
favorite
talking
stories
about-
of all
I'm talking
time,
about
by the
my-
way.
I'm talking about on parallel. Well, okay, so my
Well, yeah,
writing-
Lentz wasn't on Parallel.
No, that was Justin Birch, but I messed him up. No, I'm talking about before that. I'm talking about my almost derailing the whole thing before it actually even officially began. So my writing experience before comics was I was doing a lot of playwriting, and I was doing that because I was running a drama club at the elementary school and then at the middle school level. We didn't have a budget, and I was like, how hard could it be to write a play? So irrational confidence, and I just started writing plays, and I got better at it. A couple got published. It's nice, whatever, but it's a very different type of writing. Okay. Yeah. And one of the things about play publishing in North America is there's like these 4, 100 to 175-year-old companies that put out all those plays that schools put on, that local theaters put on. It's like, imagine that big catalog that arrives in the mailbox and you're trying to buy a play for it to put on for your local theater, whatever. Okay. And Hewer, which is one of the older ones, bought this one play that I had written for middle schoolers. But the way it works is, and the reason why they publish so few a year, they only grab a small little sliver handful. And the reason is there's no editor. Either they deem it word for word perfect and it's something in their stable, or they just say no. And so, as I'm doing these full 1-act plays or these skits that I'm writing for 4th graders or for 8th graders or whoever for like more than a decade, I don't have the editing machine. There's no 4th grader who's going to tell me, you should change that line. Shut up, kid. You know what I mean? And I didn't have an editor on any of these plays. And so the script for Parallel goes through Source Point Press. And, and Travis, who's editor-in-chief at the time, finds me the artist, finds me the letter because I don't know better, gets me an editor because I don't know any better. And I get that first set of notes back from the editor. And I went, how dare you? I got so frustrated. And I called my best buddy since 5th grade, Dougie, who's also like my attorney. And I'm like, Dougie, can you get me out of this contract? How dare they say that I can't change the line? Now,
it was an ego check. Ego check.
Dude, every single note was spot on and made the book better. But oh my God, did I get my hackles up and get precious? And that, how you can't talk to me. Of course you can. This dude, oh my God, Bob Sally was an already established writer himself and a magnificent editor, and totally made Parallel better than it would have been had I just had free reign and no editor. But like, oh yeah, speaking to that point, like it is so much closer to mom and pop shop than big industry. It is so much closer to family than a corporation that there's a slower to that. There's a slower pace. There's a greater care sometimes. Mm-hmm. But there's also the conflicts they hurt more. They're more personal. It's not detached and cold. Like every time you fight with somebody on the thing, it like hurts like your children are telling you they hate you. It like it's just as bad as anything like that, as opposed to just some big corporate entity saying no. That sucks, but like it ain't the same thing as the person you've been living and breathing a book with for 2 years goes, you suck. It's not. It hits so differently.
Yeah, no. And we told a story, me and Martin, about how he initially kind of like pushed back a little bit on some of the things I was saying and why I was saying he didn't really get it. And then when he saw the book in his hands and he saw how each page flowed into the next and how those 2 pages that we had such disagreement on about it was smoke rising. I'm like, it has to be a specific way so it can work on both pages. He was like, it's fine. I'm like, no. it's not. Like, we need to make it work. He looked at me and goes, "You were right. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, we kind of realize now, if we make any type of criticism or anything like that, like, listen, I'm going to tell you straight exactly what I think, because I want it to be the best. It's not me attacking your art. It's me saying we can do this better."
Yeah.
And he's now to that point where he's like, because we're actually having difficulty with this one specific page, because he's more used to doing like action poses, and I've got him drawing this son of a bitch in a freaking desk looking at his phone, and he's like, these are a little bit more difficult for me. I'm like, take your time. That's why I'm not with a publisher, because they would say hurry the shit up, and I'm gonna say, we'll do it when it gets done. It has to look right. And when you get that, you talk about family, like it's a really strange and really like loving family out of nowhere that start out as complete strangers and work together to create something special. And you looking at each other like, 5 years ago, we don't know each other at all. And now I can't imagine going a couple days. Like, if he doesn't send me even a message in a couple days, I'm like, hey, are you still alive? Like, I don't check in on my family, you know, like they check in on me, kind of thing. Like, see, are you still alive? You know, but I'm reaching out like, hey, are you all right? I haven't heard from you for a couple days. Yeah, this one panel's pissing me off, and I don't want to talk to you about it. All right, fair enough. I'll leave you alone. But yeah, no, when you indie comics, and I say this all the time, it's most of the time they're that much better, not only because of the family creating it, it's because when we create an indie comic, if that indie comic isn't amazing, there will not be a second. There will not be the next chance to make a different book or something like that. So we put literally our heart and soul into these books to try to make sure that we can keep going. Because this dream, like you said, if you want to get rich and famous, you in the wrong profession, my friend. But if you want to tell stories, do it.
There's right, and if it's one of the things about, like, I've always said this, and then something new that I want to talk about today too. Like, there's a different structure and a different meaning behind supporting independent creators. Because, you know, the disadvantage is there isn't 80 to 90 years of corporate infrastructure behind you, supporting you and propping up something that is mid, is good, is bad, is whatever. Okay.
Right.
The advantage comes, and you've heard me say this before, indie comics are the most malleable form of comics because there is no 80, 90 years of editorial mandate either telling you what kind of story, much less what you can do with a character or what type of story you can tell. So advantages, disadvantages. But like we said, because the margins are so small when they exist at all, because the reach, even though it is now technically easier to get a comic in the world than it's ever been before because of 21st century technology.
I wouldn't say easier. I would say there's more access to it.
Okay, good. Yes. Right. Process. Okay. Yeah, I'm not talking about process. I'm talking about the fact that once you do the work, it is easier to make it a public,
to put it out there.
Thing. But then, of course, because there's always the other side of the coin is culture is so fractured into these tiny niches. Just because it's public doesn't mean more than, say, 3 people will ever see it, much less appreciate it. So there's always gives and takes. And the thing about indie comics is every dollar you spend on one, it's like it goes so much further.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally
supporting the creator, right?
You are, in a lot of cases, you are literally putting like clothes on backs and food on tables. You are keeping that mom and pop shop open. You are keeping a single creator's dream alive by supporting it in a way that it doesn't exactly translate that way when it's a giant industrial complex.
It does not. Like, if you support, and I'm not gonna derail this whole conversation into, you know, how the industry works, but for those watching that don't understand what we're talking about here, if you buy a DC comic book, the people that work on that book are gonna get pennies, maybe, from you purchasing that one single issue. That collected edition versus if you buy a comic book, or a collected edition from an indie creator, the difference is just colossal. Like you cannot compare how much of your money is going straight to that creator on the indie scene versus in the big two.
Yeah, you're not contributing to royalties or a paycheck when you support an indie artist. You are helping them pay their bills.
Yep.
And that's different. I'm not saying one is better or one is worse, but it is different. Right. And then there's something like right now, Ringo voting is open.
Yeah.
Like Ringo Awards are kind of like the best way to describe them for people who don't know. So if you know movies, you understand the difference between the Oscars and the Golden Globes.
Right.
They are both huge. They are both a massive honor, but one is a tier above the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Ringos are kind of like the Golden Globes to the Eisner's Oscars.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the process is different. There's a lot more opportunity for recognition for smaller books. Mm-hmm. Okay. And one of the ways to support like an indie artist is by going and voting for the Ringos, because there's a certain amount of fan influence on the voting. And so like for like a book like Jane, which we're kind of eligible in 9 categories right now, and I think I like sent you those categories, Kyle. Yep. It's like you go there and you follow their instructions and make sure you prove by typing your email twice that you're not a robot, because they're trying to do that. And then you prove that you're not a dumb by following their format and putting like the creator's name, a hyphen, and then the book title.
Oh man,
I can't tell you how many votes are lost because they're like, hyphen, I'm not following those rules, or whatever it is, or making sure you confirm the email when they send you the email at the end after you finish voting. It's very tricky because it's like, thanks for voting. And then if you don't press that next button, it doesn't actually count.
Doesn't go through.
But like, it's one of those things. It's one of those things that you don't even have to spend $1. But like you go and vote for like me for best writer, or Annie for best artist, or Dave for best letter, or the book for best graphic novel. And like just that vote is something that people who are gatekeepers of what we get to see and don't get to see that there is support for smaller books that might mean something to you, or even just the voice of like, you haven't read my book and yet your voice is going to count just in support of smaller books by going and voting in these 9 categories. And like it puts something out there, and whether it benefits me directly or there's actually an effect where just because maybe some recognition comes, it's a brighter spotlight on all those people bleeding and sweating and living that indie comic production lifestyle, which is kind of cool. I really support it as an opportunity, because it gets it in front of a jury of your peers, and they get to then the book lives and breathes on its own merits, Right. And it's like a really easy thing to do, whether you've read that book or not, to just kind of like throw support behind a type of writing and a type of creation that I think we all appreciate and we all love.
Yeah, this isn't like back in the day where you had to pay to vote for things. This is not like and listen, I know there's a lot of people out there that voted for like America's Next Got Talent and all those other things that they can vote through their phones.
My God.
You can do the same thing through your phones, through your computer, and it means a lot. I mean, when you look at because when I heard, I thought the book was one of the best books I've ever read before any nominations. And then when I heard it was nominated, I was like, see, I was right. I knew it wasn't just me. It gives a lot of almost like praise to the fans for liking it so much. And Jane American, I mean, I'm mad at myself that I don't have the big book yet.
We're going to take care of that.
From what I've read, it's just so fantastic. It's set. You take this. It's basically a period piece that's covering this really deep and heartfelt story, and then you have this little sprinkle of superhero tropes on top that aren't thrown in just to be thrown in. Like, it makes sense, and you look at how, and especially in a lot of your books, you do a really good job at telling the story of the untold, is how I look at it. Like, you looked at, you have back in those times, a woman couldn't really do anything, nevertheless be a superhero. You know what I mean? Or have those superpowers.
Metaphorically or literally, because it
Right.
works on both levels. But yeah.
You know what I thought was really 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 important that was added in that book is like, yes, we all know the stories how everybody had to contribute to the war efforts, right? But when the war was over, you rarely see any footage or any coverage on what happened after. And being in your story, the aftermath, like women getting fired, women being sent back home, women not being either allowed on those working spaces because the men were back, or like in the wire factory, for example, he gave priority to veterans, to hire veterans over the the woman that he had already in there. So we typically don't see that. Yes, we know how like women contributed, how women were working, you know, these factories, doing all this. I I like it's a testament to the human spirit, right? What we accomplish, not just in the front lines, but in back home and during the contributions to the war efforts, right? Every penny matter, every piece of metal, everything. People was like recycling cans to help soldiers. People were like forfeiting their comic books so soldiers could have comics, you know, in the front lines, right? But what happened after? Like all these women that gave their sweat, their tears, their life, that lost their husbands to the war, what happened to them? They got pushed out.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that.
We got to get history nerdy one more time. And like all my history nerds out there know that everything is interconnected, right? There is no isolated historical story. There is
nothing happens in a vacuum.
You go back a decade before, and the root of the thing that you're studying in school actually gestated a decade or 2 decades or a century before. And like you know your history well enough that the civil rights movement in America in the 50s and the 60s for African Americans, and like the equal work and equal pay movements of like the 70s and the 80s for women, both they find their gestation in World War II in the direct aftermath, because you have these two massive groups of Americans who literally hold the country together when a massive workforce gets shipped overseas, and get that taste of exponentially increased equality through necessity, right? Society wasn't asking for that. Society wasn't ready for that. It was a necessity.
Right.
You know, the Great Migration north and populating the factories with African Americans, and then the women stepping in the workforce as well. And those two things happening out of necessity, they got a taste. And then, you know, society after the war said, well, yeah, okay, fine. Thank you, I guess. But back to where you belong, back to where you were before. And that is the seed that creates the Montgomery bus boycott 15 years or 10 years later. That is the seed that creates sit-ins 15 years later. That is the seed that creates what happened in the 60s and the 70s with like the possible ERA, you know, 25 years later. That's where it all comes from.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just like you don't, it's all out there. So I like telling the story. I like focusing on the story, but like, if that's your time period, well, all that exists. Don't ignore it, but it's there organically. Like we said before, don't crowbar it in. But yeah, I really like the idea of whatever your motivation is, like support the stuff that you love. Right? No shame if it's a big company thing or a small company thing, but like support the stuff that you love. And if you've got $1 to spare, support them with your pocketbook, because it makes a difference. It allows it to kind of keep on going.
Yeah.
You know, like Parallel, I think you can still get Parallel special edition through Simon and Schuster and through Amazon and stuff. But you know, you contact me on Instagram or email or whatever, you know, maybe we'll post my link tree or whatever. You can find all those things. I'd rather send you a signed copy. I get a bigger margin and you get the connection to the creator. You know, you want a copy of Jane, come and see me at a show. reach out to me on email, reach out to me on Instagram, reach out to me on Blue Sky. I'll send you one. Heck, if you're in the United States, I will ship it to you for free. We'll talk about cover price. I'll put a nice inscription in there if you want it, and I'll eat the shipping because I want good stories in people's hands, right? It means a lot to me that people are willing to support it, willing to take a risk on it, whatever you want to call it. So if that's Ringo voting, and we'll put all that stuff up for, and this is the blatant, pitch part, or if you want a book, just reach out to me. We'll take care of you, right? There's something kind of cool. I think it's what made LCSs very popular for several decades, right? It was that the spinner rack was cool in the 60s and 70s, because kids could get the comics or whatever, but it wasn't like the dude at the drugstore knew anything.
Right.
Ben Grimm.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was just like, I don't know, I put these on the spinner rack. Grab one, kid. Give me your 12 cents. Just like created a community, right? And it was like it became the hangout thing. And in an era where
what does it call them? It was third spaces for comic book nerds.
Yeah. Like you know what? You reach out to me on Instagram, Blue Sky, or email and want to chat, like I'll talk your ear off. You want a book for me? I'm sending you a personalized book from the creator with my dumb signature in it at a better deal than you can get in the shop. You got questions? I'm going to talk to you because I'm a fan too. And I know how much that meant to me for years being on the other side of the table. Like I'm off to, since we're live right now, like I'm off to Traverse City, Cherry Capital Comic-Con tomorrow for the weekend, for Memorial Day weekend. And my favorite thing about this is just talking to people.
Yeah.
Like having those cool conversations, whether it's about my book or whether it's about, I can't tell you how many people get roped into an X-Men conversation when they just came over to like buy a book and like, sorry, you're staying for an extra 20 minutes and we're talking about X-Men. And, like take advantage of that because you don't, again, not throwing shade, but it is a different experience when you're interacting with a creator attached to something larger and something more corporate. Okay.
Yep.
And so like, reach out to those indie creators, take a chance on that book, buy something for me, and then talk to me about it. And we'll hang out. We will hang out digitally. We'll hang out in person and we'll talk about comics that we both love. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And like with my book, I've told everyone, like, if you buy a copy from me, just let me know your email and I will send you a PDF.
Yeah.
So you don't have to damage the what I hope to one day be a collector's item.
Right.
I want you to read it. I'm telling this not to be famous, not to get rich, but to tell the story I want to tell. So if you want to read it, yeah, you can have it for free. I don't care. Take it. Like, please read it. Because that's the thing when it comes to indie creators, we care that much more. It's not just a job to us, which is nothing wrong with it having a job making just comics. I envy that. That's amazing. Lucky them. That's no shade whatsoever. But they might have 10 books they're working on and having to work on 11, 12, 13. And we're here writing our stories like we want them. And it means that much more to us. And
it's personal. You have stake on it. You have a lot of stock on it.
Yeah.
And of course, you wrote the thing. You created the thing. You want to share it with the world. You want to tell people about it. You want to hear what people have to say, whether it's good or bad, right? Like it doesn't matter. They read it. They supported it. Let me hear it, right? Did you like it? What you think? Like it's I don't know. It's like a more intimate relationship when you support an indie creator rather than anybody that's doing like a Batman or a Superman, right? Like they'll have their own personal idea of what those characters are or what they could be, but they don't own them.
Right.
They didn't shape them, right? They just had their turn at bat on that book, on that series. It's not something that they're gonna go home and think about it after they're done, compared to like you guys are gonna be talking about Here Walks Monkeys forever, Jane American forever, because those are your babies.
Yeah.
That's how I see it as a fan, as a reader, as a
gentlemen, we are all on the same page.
Well, like we on this podcast, we're not just indie. Like we cover some titles with Marvel and DC.
We do.
So it's like we love, and we talked about this many times, Jason. I don't understand why anyone would limit themselves to Marvel or DC or indies. That's content you're robbing yourself of.
Yeah.
If it's a good book, I like it. Like Absolute Flash, I'm reading that. Ultimate Wolverine, I'm reading that. And then any indie book I can get my hands on, basically. Exquisite Corpses, yes, which I have an exclusive with as well.
Plug it in.
I want to say I have a total of, I think, 5 exclusives. There's one Good Boy, so that's Gunn and Dr. Christie.
Yeah.
Then it's Dracula, World Tree, Exquisite Corpses, all Tynion, and then Jane American. So I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty awesome little group of people there. I don't back projects unless I absolutely believe in them, and I know because when we did this is the Jane American exclusive that we did.
Yeah.
We did this, and it was a big, awesome thing, and it meant so much to me because, like I said, me and Jason have been talking about Parallel in this book for years. So for me to get my little piece of it, it meant so much to me.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that, like I said, my list of exclusives is not very long, but they're all fan-freaking-tastic.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
that's cool.
That's a nice little tidbit there for you.
Yeah. Oh God, so nice talking to you guys. I love it.
Well, listen. You are always welcome on anything I do, and I know, like I said, I sent you directly. By the way, I don't know if I didn't tell you this. I sent your review that you did on League of Comic Geeks directly to Jason. I want you to see what my co-host said about your book. And
I did not know you did that.
Yeah, I definitely didn't tell him I was doing that.
Did you tell my reaction?
No, because I didn't tell him I sent it.
I'm just learning about this right now live.
I teared up.
Oh, okay.
That was something else. That hit me in the gut and in the heart in the absolute best way. You would have brought my grandfather to tears had he lived to be able to read that review. That was something else. Yeah.
Listen, I write reviews to have like some notes for me if I ever go back to the book, because I typically do, right? And I wrote that just in case I have to go back to the book at one point or tell somebody about it. I was like, okay, here's the review I have. Here are my thoughts on it. And I didn't even share it with Kyle. I just told him I wrote a review of it. And
I tell you what,
I didn't know.
You didn't know that I got to see it. I didn't know that you've only read the first 32 pages. Yeah. I'm worried for you right now because when you read the rest of this thing, you might pop. Like if that was your reaction for just that, what I consider literally like the first couple beats of the story, Snapshot. When you get to the rest of this thing, I'm worried for your health and safety. It's gonna level you in some ways, buddy. Oh. And we got to get a copy of this into your hands. But I need you to like. I don't know. You need to be like sitting down, and maybe you got like a seatbelt on or something.
Yeah, definitely. I'll sit on my daughter's booster.
I'm worried.
Booster chair with the straps.
You gotta put yourself in a booster.
There's some intensity.
Let's go.
There's some tragedy coming, and some intensity, and some harrowing stuff. And I don't know. I want you to read it, but I'm worried for your safety. I'm just going to try to be honest with you. Jeepers. Okay.
Well, man,
well, definitely. I know. At least speaking for me, I definitely can't wait to read the whole thing, and I definitely hope that anyone who sees this, whether it's now or on the replay that'll come out in a couple days, if not tomorrow, gets to take a look, reach out to Jason, talk to he was when he's not joking when he says you'll get to the point where you'll be like, all right, I gotta go. We've been talking for 3 hours. That's just how we are. And I think that's why we always, and I want to say we did very well at not tangenting off after that first little one.
Maybe the best we've ever done.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. This could. What are we? I'm looking at this is an hour 15 right now. This could very easily. We could be at this point, and we're talking about 3.5 hours. That is something that has had the potential to happen in the past.
Listen, I didn't know what to expect, because when we have a guest, Kyle will tell me, hey, have some questions, or I want you to ask the guest this specific question. And he didn't even give me a list or ask me to write anything down. I was like, how is this going to go?
Yeah, when it comes to me and Jason, like the first one we super scripted. Like I was like, here are all the questions ahead of time, so you know what you're gonna ask. Yeah. And then like we realized about halfway through that we weren't even looking at the questions.
Nope.
We were just talking, and they were rolling into each other just organically. From that day on, we're like, no, we're not. We don't plan it. We just go.
Yeah. So for my people who are like, this is driving them nuts, and it's too whatever. Like we'll put up like in the rewatch, you'll put up the links, right? Link tree, stuff like that, so you guys can reach out to me, and I'll get a book in your hands, and I'll personalize it or sign it or whatever you want. It's direct, it's cool. Go give me a follow, give me a chat, come and see me at a show. You find me on Instagram. I got my list of all the rest of the shows that I'm doing the conventions for the rest of the year. Let's go read some good comics together, and then go vote. Go vote in the Ringos. Yeah. Like, we'll put that stuff up too. Like, it makes a difference. Like, you don't have to spend a penny, and you can make a difference in indie comics by throwing some votes out.
Go a long way.
Yeah. So I'm gonna add a whole bunch of the graphics and post step by step, just so if you're watching it live, check back for the steps if you didn't catch it just as we explained it. But yeah, this is any type of nomination is huge, but Ringo is special. Like, it's one of those things where, like, even I think the non-super in-depth comic fans kind of go, Ringo nomination, what's that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that gives even the most novel and most cavalier fan the ability, like, if they see something was nominated, okay, I'm going to give it a shot just because it was nominated.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
They look at it and they fall in love with it. They're like, oh, I see. Like I said, with Parallel, I fell in love with Parallel the second I read it. And then I heard the nomination. I was like, see, I knew I wasn't crazy. This book is awesome.
And also, you got to remember the Eisner Awards, fans don't get to vote on that. It's critics, and specific critics at that, right? So they typically, you'll find some disconnect between a nominated whatever on the Eisner Awards and where the polls is in the fandom, right? Yep. And I'm gonna, like, prime example of this is the Wonder Woman series by Tom King got nominated, right? Regardless how you feel about it, the critics thought that it was worthy being nominated, right? If you go on social media, most content, the feeling that you will get from looking into how people feel about it is that they don't like it. In fact, they hate it, right? Because it's the fans talking. But when it comes to a Ringo, there's not that disconnect, because it's the fandom showing their love, showing their support. Like, other people that read it, we know ulterior motives, right? They purchased, they supported this project, they read it, and they say, you know what, this is worthy of recognition, right? And they went out of their way to help nominate it, to help vote for it. Yeah. So there's that big difference between an Eisner Award and a Ringo Award, and I just wanted to highlight that for people that are watching.
Go vote.
Definitely.
All right, boys, I gotta go pack for the con.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by. This is the final new episode of Planet Nerdtooine. Make sure you see Jason at all the conventions. All the links will be right here at the end. So until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.